It's odd to be asked to give a talk when the only reason you're being asked is because you're old enough to remember all the things that happened long ago, but that's how I got here tonight. So I thought I would regale you with what it was like before organic became popular. And I started in 1965, so that was a long time ago. And it wasn't as easy to talk about this, but occasionally I would encounter groups of real farmers or real extension agents and have to communicate with them. And I've always thought that humor was the best part of the game. So I would usually open by telling two stories. And I would start out with a story about the super enthusiastic organic farmer who is driving along the road. He sees a farmer standing in the field with his cows. He squeals to a halt. It's a hot summer day. He jumps out of his car, leaps the fence, and walks over to the farmer. And just as he gets to him, he steps both feet in a wet cow pie. But he ignores that. He's so enthusiastic. He's telling the farmer, my gosh, if you would change to organic farming, the world would be better. You'd save everybody. You'd make more money. Everything would be so much better. And he's noticing a glazed look on the farmer's face. So he pauses for a second and says, "Whew, sort of wet, isn't it?" And the farmer looks him up and down and says, "Yeah, and I noticed you was starting to melt." So that warmed them up. It was an anti-organic joke. They loved that. So that was a good guy. So I said, okay, now we're going to tell another joke. And this joke is, the vet is sitting in his office. He's a large animal vet. And he's chatting with the local county agent. And the phone rings. And it's the organic dairyman calling up, asking the vet if he'd come out. He's got a cow down. And the vet says to the county agent, come on, come with me on this thing. You've never been to an organic farm. You're going to see what it's like. The guy says, okay, I'll come with you. So they go out there together, and it turns out to be milk fever, and the vet says, oh, that's easy. I got some dope for that. And he gives the cow a shot, and she's back on her feet in a minute, and the organic farmer says, wow, that's great. Thank you so much. What do I owe you? And the vet says, oh, that'll be $15 for my time and $10 for the dope. And so the organic farmer takes out his wallet and gives the vet $15 and gives the extension agent $10. Well, at that point they said, okay, this guy, maybe he isn't so easy to deal with. And so I tell them how I got into it. This is exactly true, but I tell them how I got into organic farming. And I said, I was really determined to become a farmer, but I knew absolutely nothing. So I read everything I could find. And part of what I could find was all the USDA information back in the mid-60s. Well, we started to scare them in the mid-60s. So they were writing pamphlets that said, look, nitrogen is nitrogen. Phosphorus is phosphorus. The plant doesn't care whether it comes from a manure heap or a bag of fertilizer. And I said, I read this stuff, I knew nothing. And I said, wow, that's great news. Because there's a farm down the road with a huge pile of horse manure, they're giving that away. And there's a chicken farm with a huge pile of chicken manure, lots of phosphorus in it, they're giving that away. And I said, I started organic farming with the assurance of the USDA that everything would work fine, because there was no difference. And that got them thinking a bit, because that was exactly the opposite of what they were trying to teach at the moment. But it got them realizing that maybe what they'd been trying to teach was a little foolish. And at that point, a guy stood up, and we've been talking about phosphate rock, and he said, what fool would think it made any sense to spread ground up rock on the soil? And I didn't say anything, but I looked at him quietly. And I could see his mind saying, oh yeah, I was just out spreading limestone today, wasn't I? And I could see him thinking, oh yeah, maybe these guys have something. But this was all part of, there was so much of a reaction against us. So, we move up to the 70s, the Carter administration. They started to try and do something under Bob Bergman, who was a really good Secretary of Agriculture. And I actually went down there for a couple of meetings, and I met the guy who was the USDA's cotton and tobacco entomologist. And he said to me, "Would you come down to Mississippi with me?" He said, "The Delta Council," and these are the guys who were growing cotton, "want to meet an organic farmer." And I thought I was going to look like Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman at the end of this trip, but I figured, okay, we'll go down there with this guy. And we went down. The meeting was held in a huge country club, and all of these Mississippi cotton growers looked just like Lyndon Johnson, this sort of large, avuncular Southerner. And the minute I walked in, I knew I was in trouble. So rather than saying anything, I asked a question. I said, "What do you guys think organic farming is all about?" And one of these Lyndon Johnson types stood up and said, "Well, hell, that's easy. Them organic farmers, they want to ban all our pesticides and they want to break our large farms up into small farms and give them to the poor." This is what the guy thought. So I quietly explained to him that there may be some extremist anti-pesticide groups, but organic farmers, being farmers, knowing how hard it was to do this, weren't likely to be part of that. And there may be land reform movements, but maybe organic farmers weren't necessarily part of that either. And so I started telling him about some large-scale farmers who were good friends of mine out in the Midwest who had become organic farmers and were now putting more money in the bank at the end of each month because they weren't buying all these chemical inputs. And I said, "Anybody interested in that?" Every hand went up. These guys wanted to make more money. So I said, "Okay, this is how you're going to achieve that." And you could look around the room and realize there was a lot of political power and money in this room. And I said, "You guys are going to talk to your senators and congressmen, who you obviously know well, and you're going to tell them that they are to talk to the USDA and insist that the USDA start right now doing research in organic farming." And they looked at me and said, "Why the hell would we want to do that?" And I said, "First, if my friends in the Midwest are correct, and it's possible to do it organically, you guys could be making more money in anything like this." And I said, "Second, the minute the chemical cotton growers are the ones petitioning the USDA to find out how to grow cotton without chemicals, man, you can defend every chemical you use forever and ever, because you're the guys who asked for the solution." Well, I'd like to announce that I was carried out of the room on their shoulders, but I wasn't. I don't think I ever did anything about it. But it was an interesting thought for them that maybe this wasn't such a foolish idea. Maybe there was something going on. And one final story, because this was really neat. And now we're moving into the late 70s. 1979, Berglund was still in office, and Berglund had a neighbor up in Wisconsin, one of those northern Midwestern states where he lived, who was farming organically and who came to Christmas dinner. And Berglund, being Secretary of Agriculture, said, "Oh my God, what's going on?" Because he knew this guy was smart and knew this guy was cool. So he started the first USDA investigation of organic agriculture, which was published in 1980 as report and recommendations on organic farming. It was very positive. And sometime the summer before, I got a phone call from one of these guys who'd been chosen to do this. And he'd heard that I'd run tours of European farms and wanted to know what was going on with organic farming in Europe. So I said, "Well, better than telling you about it, why don't we take your research group over there and expose them to what's going on?" So he called back a couple minutes later, said Berglund had approved the money. And so there were 4 guys on this. There was a compost specialist, a soil specialist, an entomologist, and a sociologist. The sociologist was Garth Youngberg, who eventually became the USDA's organic rep until Reagan's people came in and kicked him out. Yeah. And we had a Volkswagen bus and a translator, and we drove around to visit 12 of the best organic farms in Europe. And the thing that sticks in my mind more than anything else, it was a wonderful farmer. Actually, he also had a company making farm machinery for organic farmers named Weichel. We were on Weichel's farm, And we're standing at the edge of the field talking to him through the translator. And the entomologist, who was on loan from a major Midwestern college where he was the dean of entomology, walks out into the fields that we were standing next to. And the entomologist pose, he's sweeping his hand over the crops to see what insects there are. And we're continuing to discuss with Herr Weichel what he does and the equipment he uses. And finally we notice that the entomologist is just standing there in stunned silence. And we stop and we look over at him, and he turns to us and he says, "We can't do this well with chemicals." And it was sort of like the Baptist went into the Catholic Church and God said, "Hi, I live here." This was such a mind-blowing experience for this man. I never thought he was the same person again. But this is the potential of what we have been doing all these years. And if we keep after it, as we have been, I guarantee you that there's going to be an 80th and 100th anniversary, and we're going to take charge. Thank you very much.